Love as a Power comes from the Narada Bhakti Sutras. This is the third in an ongoing series. But just to give you a quick review of what we've already covered, we find that in Sutra 2, Narada gave the definition of bhakti. Bhakti is intense love for God. So also in his third sutra, he claimed divine love is immortal bliss, amrita swarupa cha, undying love. So bhakti, therefore, is supreme love. It never comes to an end. In other words, divine love is immortal. And for three reasons. The object of our love, our chosen ideal, is immortal. The bliss-filled devotee who cherishes the Lord in his or her heart is therefore a part of God and is also imperishable. And third, no circumstances can terminate such a lover, such a relationship between the love for God, the lover for God, and God, him or herself. So once a bhakta experiences that supreme love, it's an inner experience because the object of our love is within us, within all of us. It is our essence, and therefore it is everlasting. Mature bhakti means being established in that supreme love, feeling it always, wherein the devotee, the object of devotion, and devotion itself are merged. In other words, the devotee is filled with that love, that ananda, the ananda of Satchit Ananda, absolute existence, knowledge, and bliss. So in this sense, Sri Ramakrishna explained, devotion and knowledge are identical in the end. People do not understand them well and mistakenly think that they are different. What is bhakti? What is devotion? Love for God and playing with him in various ways. Sri Ramakrishna goes on to explain. The devotee says, "Thou art the master, and I am thy servant. Thou art all, and all is thine." He continues, knowledge also means absolute love. That love is so intense that the jnani, the recipient of knowledge, never wants to be separated from God. He wants to become one with him. Hence he says, I am he. I am Shiva, the absolute. Sri Ramakrishna delineated in yet another way these levels of love. He said, Hanuman, the prince of devotees, said to Ramachandra, Lord, when I have consciousness of the body, then thou art the master, and I am thy servant. When I considered myself as a jiva, or individual soul, then thou art the whole, and I am a part. And when I think I am the Atman, that is, in the samadhi state, I feel I am thou, and thou art I. There is no difference. Sutra 4. Yalabdhva uman sito bhavati, amrito bhavati, tripto bhavati. By attaining it, a devotee becomes perfect, immortal, and satisfied forever. Here the word siddhi means perfect, but it also means psychic powers, which is not the meaning here. In the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali deals with occult powers that may come to an aspirant, even unsought, when following concentration of the mind in Raja Yoga and in Bhakti Yoga. But he states, the greatest power is to overcome them. Why? Because they're obstacles to spiritual growth and can sidetrack one from genuine pursuit of God. They're considered a type of worldly enjoyment and have nothing to do with genuine spiritual attainment. But we might ask, how do such powers come? The Sanskrit word is ojas, the highest form of energy in the human body, which manifests from self-control. It's stored in the brain, and it expresses itself as intellectual and spiritual power. Swami Vivekananda explained in his talk in England on lessons on Raja Yoga. He said it gives a tremendous power of attraction, this ojas. Ojas is manufactured from nerve currents. It has this peculiarity. It is most easily made from that force which manifests itself in the sexual powers. If the powers of the sexual centers are not frittered away and their energies are wasted, action is only thought in a grosser state. They can be manufactured into ojas. So in this verse, siddhi means perfection in divine love, complete surrender to God, by means of which attains unlimited love for God, which is nothing less than oneness with God. Amrito bhavati means immortal, because one who has attained perfection is no longer attached to the body, and therefore no longer fears death, because one attains immortality. Sutra 5. Yat prapya na kinchit vanshati na shochati na dveshti na ramate notsahi bhavati. On attaining that devotion, the devotee does not desire anything else, does not grieve, is free from hatred, does not take pleasure in the vanities of life, and loses all desire to gain anything for oneself. In this sutra, Narada first states, on attaining that devotion, the devotee does not desire anything else. He is describing herein the para stage of bhakti, wherein supreme love is its own fulfillment. Why? No other experience could possibly top the bliss that one receives from such devotion. Therefore, such fulfillment, how could any further desire arise in the mind? Just imagine that type of fulfillment. Furthermore, the fulfillment of such divine love is everlasting. It will never dwindle. Therefore, how can there arise any grief, any worldly desire? However, such a soul's heart is not stone. It melts in anguish at the suffering of others. And in Vivekananda's case, it drove him to turn his selfless grief into one desire, to serve the living God and humankind by founding the Ramakrishna mission. Sutra 6. Yat gyatva makta bhavati stabdaha atma ramaha bhavati. The devotee may first become intoxicated with bliss. Then, having realized that, he becomes inert and silent and finds joy in his own self. So God intoxication differs greatly from our ordinary happiness or even elation that depends on external circumstances or objects. Such bliss that comes from God is derived solely from the higher self. At first, absorbed in one's joy, the devotee feels God intoxicated. Then as one becomes more and more absorbed in the self, one becomes full and inert, and the external world disappears. This is the state of the highest samadhi, Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Sri Ramakrishna described the various stages of consciousness that correspond to the 7 chakras, or 7 ascending planes of the mind. He said, when the mind is immersed in worldliness, it dwells in the 3 lower planes, the navel, the organ of generation, and the organ of evacuation. The 4th plane of the mind is at the heart. When the mind dwells there, one has the first glimpse of spiritual consciousness. One sees light all around. Such a man, perceiving the divine light, becomes speechless with wonder. His mind does not go downward to the objects of the world. The 5th plane of the mind is at the throat chakra. When the mind reaches this, the aspirant becomes free from all ignorance and delusion. He does not enjoy talking or hearing about anything but God. The 6th plane is at the forehead. When the mind reaches it, the aspirant sees the form of God day and night. But even then, a little trace of ego remains. At the sight of the incomparable beauty of God's form, one becomes intoxicated and rushes forth to touch and embrace it. But one doesn't succeed. It is like the light inside a lantern. One feels as if one could touch the light, but one cannot on account of the pane of glass. Ramakrishna ends by saying, in the top of the head is the 7th plane. When the mind rises there, one goes into samadhi. Then the Brahmagyani directly perceives Brahman. But in that state, his body does not last many days. He remains unconscious of the outer world. Dwelling on this plane of consciousness, he gives up his body in 21 days. Now, we may say, why 21 days? Well, Swami Sarvagatananda, who was the founder of the Vedanta Center in Boston and in Providence, Rhode Island, when he was initiated by Swami Akhandananda, one of the direct disciples, he was posted to Kankal, where we have a hospital there. And he was determined to see if Sri Ramakrishna's words were true, because at that time, at the time of the disciples of the direct disciples, the disciples of Ramakrishna, many sadhus were coming into the hospital, into that state. And so Swami Sarvagatananda, just a young monk at that time, would test it out. Day 1, day 5, still alive. Day 10, still alive. Day 11, day 12, day 19, day 20, and then day 21. And the sadhu would give up the body. Sutra 7. Sana kama yaman mana nirodhata rupatvat. Bhakti cannot be used to fulfill any desire, being itself the check to all desires. So there's a beautiful example in the life of Vivekananda that illustrates this truth. When young Naran first came to Sri Ramakrishna, he did not accept Mother Kali. But then his father, the only earning member of the family, and it was a very well-off family seemingly, died. And suddenly, creditors were knocking at the door. Many days would pass where Naran would fast so that his family members could eat the bare necessities that were available. Unsuccessfully, he could not find a job. The situation was dire. Then one day, Naren remembered that God listens to Sri Ramakrishna's prayers. So he went to him at Dakshineshwar and begged him to beseech Mother Kali on his behalf and rid his family of its dire financial needs. In Naren's words, I hurried to Dakshineshwar and insisted on his making the appeal on behalf of my starving family. Sri Ramakrishna said, my boy, I can't make such demands, but why don't you go and ask the mother yourself? All your sufferings are due to your disregard of her. I said, I do not know the mother. You please speak to her on my behalf. You must. Sri Ramakrishna replied, my dear boy, I have done so again and again, but you do not accept her. So she does not grant my prayer. All right, it is Tuesday, auspicious to the Divine Mother. Go to the Kali temple tonight. Prostrate yourself before the Mother and ask of her any boon you like. It shall be granted. She is knowledge absolute, the inscrutable power of Brahman. By her mere will, she has given birth to this world. Everything is in her power to give. Naren said, I believed every word and eagerly waited for the night. About 9 o'clock, the master asked me to go to the temple. As I went, I was filled with a divine intoxication. My feet were unsteady. My heart was leaping in anticipation of the joy of beholding the living goddess and hearing her words. Reaching the temple, as I cast my eyes on the image, I actually found that the Divine Mother was living and conscious, the perennial fountain of divine love and beauty. I was caught in a surging wave of devotion and love. In an ecstasy of joy, I prostrated myself again and again before the Mother and prayed, Mother, give me discrimination. Give me renunciation. Give me knowledge and devotion. Grant that I may have the uninterrupted vision of thee. A serene peace reigned in my soul. The world was forgotten. Only the Divine Mother shone within my heart. Naren finished. As soon as I returned, the master asked me if I had prayed to the Mother for the removal of my worldly needs. I was startled at this question and said, no, sir, I forgot all about it. But is there any remedy now? Go again, said he, and tell her about your needs. 3 times, the master sent Naren back to the Mother, because 3 times at the sight of her, Naren became ecstatic with love for her. Bowed to her repeatedly and prayed only for love and devotion. On the 3rd time, overcome with devotion, Naren thought, what a trifle I have come to pray to the Mother about. It is like asking a gracious king for a few vegetables. What a fool I am. Naren then related, in shame and remorse, I bowed to her respectfully and said, Mother, I want nothing but knowledge and devotion. Coming out of the temple, I understood that all this was due to the Master's will. Otherwise, how could I fail in my object no less than 3 times? I came to him and said, Sir, it is you who have cast a charm over my mind and made me forgetful. Now you please grant me the boon that my people at home may no longer suffer the pinch of poverty. At last, he said, all right, your people at home will never be in want of plain food and clothing. So this is an example of the experience of genuine bhakti. Real devotion does not require anything else to satisfy the recipient. So thus we see that genuine bhakti is the same as Nirodha, what we read in the Yoga Sutras, the elimination of all desires. In this connection, Vivekananda draws the comparison of the science of devotion, of bhakti, to the science of yoga. He said, Chitta vritti nirodha means that yoga is the science that teaches us to bring the chitta, the gross mind, under the control from the state of change. The chitta is the stuff from which our minds are made and which is being constantly churned into waves by external and internal influences. Yoga teaches us how to control the mind so that it is not thrown out of balance into wave forms. So devotion silences our mind into one-pointed wave of love for God. Now we come to Sutra 8. Nirodhastu lokaveda vyapara nyasaha. Nirodha, control of cessations, means discarding public opinion, the injunctions of the Vedas, vyapara, all activities, nyasa, renouncing. Swami Bhuteshananda translates this verse as control or cessation means discarding public opinion, the injunction of the Vedas, and all activities. Swami Prabhavananda translates, renunciation means dedication of all activities, secular as well as sacred, to God. So why should we not succumb to public opinion? Because there is always an ulterior motive in doing so. But we may ask, what is wrong with following the injunctions of the Vedas? Swami Bhuteshananda mentions in his commentary, because in doing so, we are consciously or subconsciously thirsting for merit or to gain public approval. Take, for example, in the Bhagavata, the gopis were irresistibly drawn to Sri Krishna, even in the dead of night. To test the gopis, Sri Krishna asked them, why did you come to me in the forest in the dead of night? You've neglected your household duties. What will people think and say? Furthermore, this forest is full of wild and dangerous animals. The gopis answered, when we heard your flute, our hands engaged in household duties lost their power. Our feet have now lost their power to move. So how can we return? So this is an example of supreme devotion that renounces public opinion, even household duties and scriptural conventions. When the devotee's mind becomes fixed in God, it cannot be drawn back to the normal household life of duties or scriptural injunctions. It moves towards God and God alone. Swami Prabhavananda's translation of this sutra is given a more positive emphasis rather than do's and don'ts. It reads, renunciation means dedication of all activities, secular and sacred, to God. So performing selfless action, offering all our actions, secular and sacred, to our chosen ideal, brings devotion and desirelessness in its wake. It sounds simple, but when we go to practice, it takes a lot of presence of mind. So devotion to God is the most natural way to grow in renunciation. Sri Ramakrishna stated, Bhakti, love of God, is the essence of all spiritual discipline. Through love, one acquires renunciation and discrimination naturally. The further we go to the east, the more the west is left behind. In fact, it is ill-advised to force one's renunciation in the beginning of spiritual life. Why? If we force renunciation without proper preparation, a reaction is bound to follow. And this we have seen. I've seen it myself in the lives of many young people who come into Vedanta. Sri Ramakrishna used to give the example of prematurely removing a scab from a sore before it's healed. What happens? The sore becomes worse. In other words, we must let the sore dry up. Then the scab will drop off of its own accord. Similarly, Swami Prabhupada explained, we must move toward God, pray for pure devotion, learn to love God, and as that love grows in our heart, passions will naturally come under control, and our heart will cease to be attached to worldliness. Thus, the path of devotion is the most natural and the easiest to follow, because as you think of God more and more, love will grow in your heart. And as love grows, discrimination, dispassion, and purity of heart will come to you naturally. As Sri Ramakrishna stated, Bhakti, love of God, is the essence of all spiritual discipline. Through love, one acquires renunciation and discrimination naturally. Furthermore, by following the path of devotion, Sri Ramakrishna shared a hidden truth. The Bhakta feels, O God, thou art the Lord, and I am thy devotee. He added, this I is the ego of bhakti. What does such a lover of God retain? Why does such a lover of God retain the ego of devotion? There is a reason. The ego cannot be gotten rid of. So let the rascal remain as the servant of God, the devotee of God. It is the most natural path. At last, when we reach the stage where we long for God, the impurities of the mind are washed away, and we feel the presence of God drawing us inward like a magnet. This is all internal. Sutra 9. A bhakta's renunciation means that his whole soul goes toward God, and whatever militates against love for God, he rejects. So to develop indifference towards sense objects is only one part of the equation in spiritual life. The second part is cultivating one-pointed devotion to God. What happens then when we as devotees learn to develop one-pointedness in our devotion? What is the secret? Sri Ramakrishna explains, as the tiger devours other animals, so does the tiger of zeal for the Lord eat up lust, anger, and the other passions. Once the zeal grows in the heart, lust and the other passions disappear. But, we may protest, one-pointed devotion is the last word in the path of devotion. In the meantime, how can we attenuate our passions, we might ask? Swami Vivekananda shared how to turn passions Godward. He said, love must get to its right destination. It must go unto him who is really the infinite ocean of love. God is the one goal of all our passions and our emotions. If you want to be angry with him. Chide your beloved, chide your friend. Say unto the beloved, why do you not come to me? Why do you leave me thus alone? See the intimacy of the relationship, the devotee to God. As Sri Ramakrishna taught, what is lust? It is the desire to get, then desire to get him, and strengthen this desire greatly. Then when our devotion to God becomes whole-souled, something happens. Our love becomes motiveless, and we develop a love for all beings based on their experience, based on their own experience. Disciples of direct disciples would share that one begins to see the beloved's face everywhere and in every being, and lives to serve God in all. This is the vision. Swami Prabhupada shared. He was the disciple of Swami Brahmananda. We had the blessed fortune to meet the disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. He met most of them, and including Holy Mother, who were to us the embodiments of this divine love. What most attracted us to them was their motiveless love for us. We had nothing to offer them, yet they loved us more than our own parents or friends or any ordinary human being. Sutra 10. Anya Shrayanam Tyago Nanyata. Swami Bhuteshananda translates this as discarding everything other than devotion or God is one-pointedness. Swami Prabhupada translated it as whole soul devotion means giving up every other refuge and taking refuge in God. So following the scriptures and scriptural study is essential to cultivating devotion to God. When we read the scriptures, that's like keeping holy company. Online talks attract many of today's aspirants, but actually reading for oneself increases our self-reflection, and studying the scriptures increases our power of deep thinking rather than merely ingesting and parroting Vedanta concepts. Holy company is reading really means that there's a two-way street going between you and the scripture. You're cogitating, you're thinking deeply about what is being stated, and you are drawing from within yourself the understanding. Karma yoga is yet another aid in cultivating our devotion to God. By surrendering all our actions to God, we lessen our emotional investment in public opinion and increase our flow of thought toward God. When we arrive at the stage in our life wherein we constantly remember God, we then realize He alone is our strength, our only refuge, our true friend. Imagine such a feeling. Swami Prabhupada, who had met Swami Sadananda, a devoted disciple of Vivekananda, used to tell us this story. When Swami Sadananda was very ill with diabetes and very, Boshi Sen a plant physiologist who worked under the renowned botanist of Jagadish Chandra Bose, who discovered consciousness in plants, and Tabu, Boshi's younger brother, were taking care of him. He could not even sit up, and Boshi and his brother thought that he was helpless without them. They did everything for him. But once Swami Sadananda got irritated and said to them, "Do you think that I cannot get along without you? Take me and throw me out into the street. You will see. My Swamiji will come and pick me up and take me on his lap." Sutra 11. Swami Bhuteshananda translates this as the devotee's conduct should be in conformity with public views and the Vedic injunctions and indifferent toward the views that are against them. Now, this seems to be the opposite of the Swami's translation of Sutra 8 of Nirodha. The control or cessation means disregarding public opinion, the injunction of the Vedas, vyapara, all activities, nyasa, renouncing. Swami Prabhavananda's translation is to reject whatever militates against love for God, means performance of such secular and sacred activities as are favorable to devotion to God. Swami Bhuteshananda explains his translation of this verse over and against Sutra 8. He says, renunciation of all other objects and all other pursuits is called one-pointedness. Discarding the dictates of the Vedas and also discarding public opinion have been mentioned. But then all these are not to be discarded in toto. Those scriptures or public opinion which will be conducive to the growth of devotion are not to be discarded. So why this contradiction? Because the Vedas address many subjects, secular and sacred. Secular subjects are how to go to heaven, how to acquire wealth, how to have progeny. And sacred subjects are how to control the mind, how to acquire devotion and knowledge, how to realize God. Swami Prabhavananda explained what is good action and what is bad action, what is right and what is wrong. The one criterion is that is good and right, which helps you to keep your mind in God. The evil or wrong is that which makes you forget God. So how can we choose between right and wrong? Swami Brahmananda teaches, if through discrimination you can impress your mind the joy and fullness of the spiritual life and the folly of worldly attachments, it will devote itself more and more to God. Then how do we discriminate? Swami Premananda, direct disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, advised, retire into solitude occasionally, practice discrimination and self-analysis, and try to discover the subtle obstacles that obstruct your path to spiritual progress. You will find that there are many subtle impressions, habits of thought and action lying dormant and hidden in the subconscious regions of the mind. Analyze yourself in solitude, find out the obstacles, and then struggle without compromise to remove them. Now you may ask, where can I go to be in solitude? Well, many of our centers also have retreat centers. And we have a beautiful retreat center in our Vedanta Society of Southern California. I've often encouraged men to visit our Trabuco Monastery and women to visit our Santa Barbara Convent and stay there. Or couples can also visit there and in Hollywood. and to ingest a large injection of spiritual life. And you will find that anything that you have been troubled with will be resolved in such an environment. And in the meantime, keep coming here, and you yourself will find that the satsang is a great support in your spiritual life. Sutra 12. Bhavatu nischaya dhardhyad urdhvam sastra shastra rakshanam. Swami Bhuteshananda's translation is, there should be conformity with the scriptures until one's faith is firmly established. So we don't just do our own thing. We try to follow the scriptures, meaning the guru. Some of you have a guru, a holy person. If you don't, so try to follow that along with the scriptures. Swami Prabhupananda's translation reads, scriptures are to be followed as long as one's spiritual life is not firmly established in God. So in the beginning, we need the guidance. Even those of us who are far along in spiritual life, we go to our teachers. We seek the holy company of our brother and sister monastics. So from his own experience, Sri Ramakrishna explained, one should hear the scriptures during the early stages of spiritual discipline. After attaining God, there is no lack of knowledge. Then the Divine Mother supplies it without fail. For spiritual aspirants, he used to say, do you know my attitude? Books, scriptures, and things like that only point out the way to reach God. After finding the way, what more need is there of books and scriptures? Then comes a time for action. And he would give the following parable to explain. A man received a letter from home informing him that certain presents were to be sent to his relatives. The names of the articles were given in the letter. As he was about to go shopping for them, he found that his letter was missing. He began anxiously to search for it, several others joining in the search. For a long time, they continued to search. When at last the letter was discovered, his joy knew no bounds. With great eagerness, he opened the letter and read it. It said that he was to buy 5 seers of sweets, a piece of cloth, and a few other things. Then he did not need the letter anymore, for it had served its purpose. Putting it aside, he went out to buy the things. So how long is such a letter necessary? The master would then ask his listeners. As long as its contents are not known. When the contents are known, one proceeds to carry out its directions. In the scriptures, you will find the way to realize God. But after getting all the information about the path, you must begin to work. Only then can you attain your goal. Once Swami Shraddhananda, a disciple of Swami Shivananda, who was the head of the Vedanta Society of Sacramento, a wonderful holy man, I used to visit him, and he also used to come to our convent and stay with us in the monastery above the convent. At one time, he told me, Swami Prabhupada was my guru and also a disciple of Swami Brahmananda. But once he said, I don't care to read the Upanishads anymore. It was in his older age. Swami Shraddhananda divulged to me, I was shocked because I didn't understand, but now I do. There comes a time when you yourself have the realization, then you do not need the words of the scriptures to remind you. Imagine such a state where one feels so completely self-fulfilled. In the Gita, chapter 2, verse 46, Sri Krishna says, When the whole country is flooded, the reservoir becomes superfluous. So to the illumined seer, the Vedas are all superfluous. Sutra 13. Anyata patitya shankaya. The translation reads, otherwise there is a fear of falling from the ideal. So whatever scriptural passages that are conducive to increasing our devotion are not to be discarded. There is always the danger of past impressions related to sense pleasure that can rise and overtake the aspirant, unless one has attained the highest experiences. Never feel you have come to the end of spiritual life. That is why the qualified guru is so important. One who can see into the heart of the disciple and guide him or her along the precipice as they ascend higher and higher in spiritual life. Sutra 14. Social customs and practices need only be followed until one's love for God grows intense. But acts such as eating, drinking, etc., which are necessary for the preservation of the body, must not be given up. So here are teachers to teach us to follow the customs and dress of our country of origin, to adjust to time, place, and circumstances. And here, I remember in the first flush of Asian immigration, when many Indians first joined our Vedanta centers, there was a tendency of some American devotees to imitate the Indian dress. Swami Asheshananda, disciple of Holy Mother, would scold them, do not imitate. In other words, such externals as dress, food, language are not the badge of spiritual life. Our interior life is the only true indicator. How much time we devote to our spiritual practices, how we treat others, how much time we devote to meditation, karma yoga, mind control, and so on. That is why our teachers impress on us the importance of self-analysis. Swami Brahmananda used to stress self-reflection. He said, devote some time every day to self-analysis. Ask yourself, why have I come here? How am I passing my time? Do I really want God? Am I really struggling to find him? Swami Brahmananda continued, a man's mind tries to deceive him, but he must not allow himself to be swayed by his mind. He must curb and rule it. Hold fast to the truth. Be pure-hearted. The purer you become, the more will your mind be absorbed in God. You will be able to see the subtle deceptions of the mind, and you will be able to root them out. Who are your enemies, he said? Your own senses. But if you can control them, they will become your friends. Your mind is your only enemy, and your mind is your only friend. He ended by saying, the aspirants who analyze themselves thus can wipe out the subtle deceptions of the mind, and by so doing, move rapidly along the path of spirituality. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.